So let's imagine you're a government minister of an imaginary country and your brief is to ensure energy security for every one of your citizens while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions as quickly and effectively as possible. It's a tricky one because you know you get lots of your energy by burning carbon-based fuels that release massive quantities of those gases into the atmosphere. You get some good news when you meet with a group of delegates from a completely new energy generation industry who explain that their technologies don't emit any greenhouse gases at all during their operational lifetime. You think that's an absolutely splendid solution and send them off to get cracking. But then you meet with another group of delegates from the existing carbon-based energy generation industry and they tell you that those newfangled technologies are intermittent and you can't rely on them all the time, so where's your energy security now, eh? And anyway, they say, you'd have to build out massive amounts of expensive infrastructure to accommodate the new stuff, plus you'd have to add lots of other complicated new technology onto your electricity grid to coordinate it all. Luckily for you, though, they explain, they've got a much better solution. They will simply bolt giant vacuum cleaners onto the smokestacks of all their power stations and factories to suck up all their greenhouse gases and store them all neatly away somewhere so they never get into the atmosphere in the first place. You think this is also an absolutely splendid solution. Until you start reading through the small print. Hello, and welcome to Just Have a Think. Now, if you found that introduction a bit simplistic and patronising, then it achieved its objective, because that is roughly how simplistic and patronising the fossil fuel lobbyists are being when they talk to lawmakers and the public. We'll have a think about that in a moment, but before we get stuck in, I must just let you know about the biggest UK Everything Electric show of this year, which is coming up in Farnborough on the 11th and 12th of October. There's all the usual brilliant stuff like test drives of all the latest electric vehicles, plus a whole arena full of experts to guide you through the process of choosing heat pumps, solar panels, battery energy systems, car chargers and just about everything else related to the energy transition. There's a massive outside area as well, with great food zones and space for the kids to run around and have a bit of fun. Plus, if you come along this year, you'll get to watch the live televised finals of a fantastic new show called Zap Heap, hosted by Robert Llewellyn and the crazy genius that is Colin Furze. Oh yeah, and I'll be moderating several discussion panels across the 2 days as well. Tickets are just £10 this year, and if you use my Just Have a Think discount code at the bottom of the screen, then you'll get another 20% off that price. What's not to like? So follow the link at the top of the screen or in the description section below to grab your tickets while they're still available, and I'll hopefully see you there. So what am I on about this week then? Well, you presumably saw the thumbnail and title of the video, so you already know that I'm talking about the concept of carbon capture and storage. On the face of it, it really is as simple as I outlined in the introduction, as long as you don't ask too many searching questions about the detail. So let's ask some searching questions about the detail, starting with the size of the challenge. According to the United Nations' most recent GAP report, human activity in 2023 resulted in the release of just over 57 billion metric tonnes of CO2 equivalent gases into the atmosphere. That's an increase of 1.3% on the previous year. And for those not acquainted with the jargon of these sorts of reports, the term CO2 equivalent is just a convenient way of lumping all greenhouse gases into one single metric using what are known as global warming potential or GWP values of each greenhouse gas. Those GWP values are set out in the Greenhouse Gas Protocol issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change or IPCC. Carbon dioxide is ascribed a value of 1, and every other gas has an equivalent value based on how much more effective it is at warming the atmosphere. Then some clever boffins with posh calculators multiply all those values by the actual quantity of each gas released, and that gets us to the overall CO2 equivalent number quoted by the UN. Some of that total comes from things like methane and nitrous oxide emissions from agriculture and land use change, and also methane from our waste management systems. To assess carbon capture and storage, it's more useful to look at global energy-related CO2 emissions, which according to the International Energy Agency reached 37.4 billion metric tonnes in 2023, so 37.4 thousand million metric tonnes. The middle-of-the-road emissions projection that can be found in the latest IPCC report shows that limiting global warming to only 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels would require us humans to capture and permanently store 8.7 billion tonnes of CO2 every single year. The Global CCS Institute tells us that as of November 2023, there were a total of 41 CCS projects operating globally with a combined carbon dioxide capture rate of approximately 49 million tonnes per year, which is just a little over 1/2% of that IPCC requirement. The CCS Institute did point out, though, that there were another 361 million tonnes worth of projects in the pipeline. So how's that going? Well, according to the International Energy Agency, as of Q1 2025, just over 50 million tonnes of CO2 capture and storage was in place, reflecting what they call a modest year-over-year increase from 2023. So at an uplift rate of 1 million tonnes a year, we just need to be a little patient for about 8,500 years or so, while the industry ramps up to full carbon capture capacity. Cheap shot, I know, but you get the idea. And to be honest, I don't really need to resort to such base sarcasm, because all the other data we're about to look at kind of tell their own story. First of all, why is there such slow progress on something that the fossil fuel industry had apparently identified as the perfect solution to allow them to continue business as usual while keeping the lawmakers happy? Well, for the purposes of this video, we will ignore the scurrilous suggestion that fossil fuel companies have allegedly grown used to doing pretty much whatever the hell they like, as long as they buy the compliance and silence of the relevant policymakers with high enough compensation fees. You may say that. I couldn't possibly comment. Instead, let's focus on the economics of carbon capture and storage. At first glance, CCS looks deceptively straightforward. As I outlined right at the start of the video, essentially you bolt some capture equipment onto the side of a smokestack, pipe the carbon dioxide into a compressor, and bury it in the ground. But the real world costs are anything but simple. The IEA estimates that even capturing highly concentrated CO2 streams, like those from ethanol or ammonia production, costs about $15 to $25 per tonne. But capturing CO2 from much more dilute flue gases, like those coming out of a power station, is far more costly, typically between $40 and $120 per tonne. And those figures don't include the energy penalty. In other words, the extra fuel needed just to run the capture system. Retrofitting a coal-fired power plant with CCS can increase fuel use by between 14 and 40%. While gas plants take an 11 to 22% hit. So even before you start thinking about pipelines and monitoring or liability for leaks, the economics look grim. That's why historically CCS has piggybacked on something else, enhanced oil recovery or EOR. By pumping captured CO2 into depleted oil wells, companies can squeeze out additional barrels of crude that would otherwise stay underground. That extra oil generates revenue, effectively subsidising the high cost of capture, and in the USA also generates a tax incentive under the so-called 45Q rules designed to reward the sequestration of carbon dioxide. According to the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, more than 70% of all CCS projects worldwide rely on EOR, and between 80 and 90% of all CO2 ever captured has ended up being used to extract oil from depleted seams. So what we get is a sort of perverse climate paradox. Technically, CO2 is being captured and injected underground, which means US operators can pick up their $60 to $80 per tonne, thank you very much. But that CO2 is being used to produce more fossil fuel, which of course gets burnt and releases yet more CO2. The net benefit to the climate can be very small, or in some cases even negative, depending on how much extra oil is produced and burned. I've covered this grotesque insanity several times before on the channel, but each time we come back to it, it still does my head in. No wonder critics say CCS looks less like a serious climate solution and more like a subsidy machine. The current UK government has been warned it could be on the hook for as much as £6 billion in guarantees if its Teesside CCS project fails to deliver. Even the industry's own track record is shaky. Chevron's Gorgon LNG project in Australia, touted as the largest dedicated CCS facility in the world, has repeatedly missed its targets and faced regulatory action for underperforming. And most recently, Norway's state energy provider, Equinor, has been forced to retract claims that its Sleipner facility had been capturing about 1 million tonnes of CO2 annually, when official figures showed the real number to be closer to 100,000 tonnes. So when you put all of that together, the slow progress of CCS becomes much less of a surprise. The economics don't work without subsidies or oil revenue. The climate benefits are undermined by EOR. The scale is tiny compared to global emissions, and the track record is littered with underperformance. But it's this very latest research, published in the highly respected journal Nature in early September, that is perhaps the most damning of all. Rather than the 5 to 6 degrees Celsius of avoided warming that the fossil fuel industry claims to be achievable with the various CCS technologies, the researchers on this paper found that the realistically available range is between 0.35 and 1.2 degrees Celsius, and that's assuming all CO2 captured will be permanently sequestered and not used for enhanced oil recovery, which, as we've seen, is in itself a highly unlikely scenario. The research finds that there just aren't as many genuinely usable storage pockets in Earth's geological makeup as had been previously touted. Historical scientific literature estimated between 10 and 40,000 billion tonnes worth of storage capacity, mostly in sedimentary rock formations. The fossil fuel industry typically claims there to be around 14,000 gigatons, of which the paper explains 13,400 gigatons worth is currently undiscovered, and only 253 million tonnes worth is economically viable. This latest research establishes a so-called prudent planetary limit of only around 1,460 billion tonnes worth, again assuming all the CO2 is genuinely permanently captured without displacing and liberating other fossil fuels. The strong conclusion of the paper is that only stringent near-term gross emissions reductions can lower the risk of breaching this limit before the year 2200, which of course is a date that is far too far into the future for us humans to give a damn about, isn't it? And almost certainly too far away to represent a problematic wrinkle for our dear politicians. CCS has always been politically attractive, of course, because on paper it looks like the ideal compromise. Fossil fuel companies get to keep drilling, mining and selling their products. Governments get to tell their voters they're tackling climate change, and everyone hopes the costs will come down with scale. But both the IEA and the IPCC stress that CCS is not needed everywhere. In fact, in power generation and most of the energy system, renewables, efficiency and electrification are already cheaper and more effective. For cement or ammonia plants, and maybe for steel production, all of which have hard to abate emissions, CCS will quite likely play an important role further down the line. But they are not the major contributors to overall global emissions. So let's worry about them once we've solved the biggest problems, and let's not get seduced into using CCS as a catch-all solution to enable fossil fuels to continue business as usual, because the evidence suggests it's more of a lifeline for oil and gas producers than a lifeline for the climate. And I know I sound like a broken record on this one, but maybe we could just focus all available resources instead on accelerating the already exponential rollout of solar panels, wind turbines, energy storage and other renewable technologies, so that we can actually stop the combustion of fossil fuels in the first place. No doubt there'll be strong views on this one, and I'm sure some of those views will not exactly be in lockstep with mine. So if you're keen to express your opinion, then as always, the place to leave your thoughts is in the comment section below. That's it for this week though. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you found this video useful and informative. And if you also click on all notifications, you'll get a ping when new videos drop every Sunday. You can also directly support my work by joining the amazing group of individuals over at patreon.com/justhavathink who enable me to stay independent and keep ads and sponsorship messages out of your way. And I must just give an extra special thank you to the folks whose names are scrolling up the screen beside me here, all of whom celebrate an anniversary of Patreon support in September. Most important of all though, thanks very much for watching. Have a great week, and remember to just have a think. See you next week.